of Salem, they whispering code. Iron wood cracking, he's losing the load. Faunus uprising, the chains get erased. Keep moving forward, no fear in the chase. Darkness approaches, the heroes ignite. Shade out the light, we were born for the fight. Venom, I'm spitting, is deadly, it's raw. This is my way, I'm rewriting the law.
Okay, you beautiful friends, welcome back to the back of the semi-truck, and it's that time once again. We are jumping back into the world of Fixing RWBY Volume 1, and for me, Part 5. Now, I don't know how long we're going to be in Volume 1, but we're doing the remastered version, and if I did the math correctly, we got roughly 4 hours worth of stuff to go over. So I'm doing these in like 20-minute chunks. And well, I wouldn't say 4 hours worth of stuff, maybe 3.5. Maybe it's that long. I know as of right now, I think after this video, we will have gone through at least 2 hours of it. I don't know. I'll have to look at the next portion and find out how much longer we have on that. But I feel like we are in a good spot right now to where I can actually start doing these on a week-to-week basis. I know I say that all the time, and I end up having this done like every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and so on and so forth. But I feel like we're in a very good spot right now where I can almost make a schedule to the point where I can do it once a week. I'm probably going to shoot for Tuesday because Tuesday just sounds like it makes sense, you know, Ruby Tuesday. So we got a restaurant here in America called Ruby Tuesdays. So that's the reason why it feels like it just flows correctly for it to be Ruby Tuesday. So other than that, I don't know what else to say other than, disclaimer, I did finally do what I should have did this whole time and rewatched Volume 1 all the way through, took notes after notes after notes after notes, and I don't know how I feel about it. If you've made it this far in the intro, let me know what you think in the comments, but I might do a things I missed type video like I do for My Little Pony. I might do that for Volume 1 of this, but that video might end up being like a 2-hour video. And I don't know if I want to do something that long. So maybe I could turn it into parts 1 and 2 and stuff like that. I don't know. It's still circulating in my head, but I've got over 100 different things that I could kind of put in that video. Either way, though, I watched Volume 1, so now I know what we've changed, what we haven't changed, all that good stuff. And looking back at Fixing RWBY so far, we've changed actually quite a bit. So for me, I'm going to shut up so I can hit this play button, let him do an ad for his book real fast, and then I can also clean my glasses. So with that said, let's do it in 3, 2, 1, and play.
Also consider picking up my new action-adventure novel, The Artificer, which is now available for purchase on Amazon in digital and in print. With that all said, back to your regularly scheduled fixing. Episode 11 is now the official beginning of the Jaune Arc. This is a much derided arc of the original show because it steals focus away from our main protagonist and dedicates a quarter of the volume's focus on a single side character. In Fixing, however, we've spent considerably more time with Team RWBY to justify this, 90 minutes compared to the original show's 60. Technically speaking, the arc has been roughly doubled in size, from 20 minutes to 40, but this also doesn't accurately reflect the increased involvement of RWBY during its length. This effectively balances out that time down to roughly 20 minutes of focus for Jaune across the whole 4-episode span. A few days have passed following the duel between RWBY and
Balls. Okay, so as I do at the beginning of all of these Fixing RWBYs, I do pause in case y'all skip the intro and all that good stuff, because I've learned a long time ago that nobody stays for intros. So, you know, everybody skips ahead about 2-3 minutes. But if you want the artist who does the fan art on this, they've got their @tags down in the bottom, let me see where I'm situated, bottom right corner of the screen of the video that we're obviously playing. Obviously, it ain't going to be tagged wherever I am on the screen. So bottom right corner, and such as the one we have in front of us now, this one is at OK Doka, OKAYDOHKHAE. And I think that's an Instagram tag. So down there on the bottom right hand corner, you can get the tags for the fan art. So yeah, with that said, Jaune, his arc was pretty freaking long in Volume 1, now that I'm thinking about it. And I'm glad we're kind of stepping away from focusing on him so much in this Fixing RWBY world, and actually focusing on the main team as opposed to focusing on Jaune and how he did what he did to get into the school, and then focusing on how he's doing all these things for Cardin. And just, I love the aspect of Pyrrha and Jaune, but I just don't like Jaune necessarily by himself. I want the Pyrrha aspect to it. I don't know. Hopefully all that made sense, but either way, my main point of stopping just then was to point out that the tags are in the bottom right corner. So let's continue and play.
Weiss, which is the topic of the day between Juniper, Blake, and Yang in the dorm commons. Apparently, the relationship between Weiss and Ruby, as well as Weiss and the remainder of the team, has bottomed out, leading Ruby to drown herself in video games and Weiss to bury herself in her studies simply to avoid the others. Jaune makes some kind of remark about the duel itself, either innocuous or sarcastic, and Yang responds by pointing out that in their partner spar, Pyrrha won in under 30 seconds. We even get to see a brief clip of the fight to demonstrate the monumental difference in skill. Pyrrha, being a kind soul and with the first inklings of a crush on Jaune, tries to defend him, but Jaune rebuffs everyone, claiming he was just off his A-game. Calling his bluff, Yang and Nora dare Jaune to challenge Cardin on the next sparring day, with Nora wagering a week's worth of desserts. He accepts, wagering the last 2 X-Ray and Vav comics he got, and Pyrrha asks if that's really the wisest decision since he values his collection so much. He responds flippantly that he's not afraid. Web cut to Jaune in the arena across from Cardin, double guessing his course of action. We see a more extensive rendition of the fight between the two, with slivers of Jaune's tactical mind cutting through his inexperience to keep him afloat against a physically superior foe. However, it's apparent that Cardin's raw skill and strength outmatch him by miles. Summarily defeated, Jaune goes off to tend to his injured pride. Pyrrha watches him go, and later that night she drags him off to the roof.
Balls. When it comes to Pyrrha and Jaune, I don't necessarily want to change a lot. But whatever they do change, I do trust that they will change quite a bit, and it will be for the better. So I'm going to trust what they do, but for the most part, I want to keep what they have the same for now, because I like their dynamic. I don't understand what it is about them, but I just like their dynamic. And going back to the sparring matches, holy crap. In the last portion of Fixing RWBY that we went over, I was under the assumption that Weiss and Ruby did have a sparring match, but then going through Volume 1 again, there was no sparring match. That was Cardin and Jaune that had that sparring match. And on top of that, the only thing that Weiss had that she was doing any type of sparring with was with Professor Port with a Grim. And there was some aspects of Ruby and Weiss bickering back and forth in there, but nothing to the degree of sparring. What I was remembering, and the comment actually straightened me out and made me remember what I was remembering. In my head, I remember Weiss saying, I quit, I forfeit, stuff like that. But that was in the fan-made thing, Ruby Evermorrow, which is very well done, by the way. So go over and check that out. But that's what I was remembering, is Weiss saying that she gives up in a sparring match between her and Ilya. So, yeah. Okay. Now that I got that squared away, Jaune and Pyrrha, hoping for the best between them. I got my trust in the Fixing RWBY team, so let's do this, and blah.
He's confused why, when she very earnestly offers to help train him. To her surprise, he's offended by the offer. In his indignance, Jaune says he doesn't need her help. He doesn't need anyone's help. He has to do this on his own. Pyrrha presses him on what he has to prove by going it alone. He already got into one of the most prestigious combat academies in the world. At that, Jaune breaks and says that he didn't. He admits that in order to pursue his family name and tradition, he forged transcripts and wormed his way into Beacon. Preempting any response from Pyrrha, he defends his actions, pointing out that he's genuinely been trying to catch up, he just needs time. Pyrrha tries to say something, but Jaune cuts her off, saying that he doesn't need her pity. He got himself into this, he'll get himself out. Pyrrha pulls back from him, clearly disheartened, and quietly says, "If that's what you want, Jaune." Feeling unwanted, Pyrrha leaves. Now alone on the roof, Jaune grips his head in frustration, before Cardin appears behind him, hanging off the roof's railing. Cardin hops over the rails and reveals that the emotional moment between Jaune and Miss Perfect happened right above his room. Bringing in Jaune with an over-the-shoulder hug, he begins to say that the two of them are going to become great friends. We fade into darkness, ending the episode. Episode 12 follows the fallout of Cardin discovering Jaune's secret. We find Jaune in class, absolutely exhausted, with heavy bags under his eyes. Professor Oobleck, a scraggly, hyperactive coffee addict, is giving a lecture about a Faunus revolt in Mantle following an event known as the Great War. Spurred on largely by the destruction of culture as an attempt to cancel out the emotions that attract Grimm, the revolt ended up as a global flashpoint for Faunus-human relations around the globe. Slowly, Jaune drifts off to sleep, but a paper airplane thrown by Cardin snaps him awake, leading Professor Oobleck to call on him. He's questioned about what advantage the Faunus forces had at the Battle of Fort Castle, and he panics, looking around the room for an answer. Pyrrha tries to pantomime to him the correct answer, but he misreads it and answers, "Binoculars!"
Oh, okay. Yeah, so far, we're primarily keeping Jaune and Pyrrha and Cardin all the same for now. I got a feeling there is going to be some changes in there, but when they have something I have noticed, and I've mentioned it previously, but when they have the show proper and screenshots from the show proper on the screen, then I know that's when they're keeping things primarily the same, and when it's fan art, that's when they're actually making changes and stuff. So right now we're primarily keeping it the same. I feel like there was an indication when Jaune and Pyrrha were talking that there was a little bit of dialogue difference in there where Jaune was talking about he has to live up to his family name and stuff like that, but it's essentially the same thing as what he said in the show proper as well, because in the show proper, I think he said something along the lines of, "This is what I've always wanted to do, this is that," and I feel like it's essentially the same thing, but just slight tweaks here and there. So I like what we're doing so far, but at the same time, I'm hoping for changes when it comes to Cardin. But one thing I do want is Pyrrha to help him with that Grimm when it comes to, when Jaune is fighting the Grimm to defend Cardin from it. That is an aspect I do like of Jaune, though. He does have a lot of heart. So I don't like him per se, but I do like aspects of him. Hopefully that makes sense. Either way, let's continue and play.
The class laughs at the wrong answer, Cardin especially, but Oobleck zooms in on him, asking if he knows the correct answer. Cardin nonchalantly says that it's easier to train an animal than it is a human, leading to Pyrrha calling out his close-mindedness. Oobleck swerves the question Pyrrha's way, and she correctly deduces that night vision was the answer, since many Faunus have near-perfect sight in the dark. Blake piggybacks on that and elaborates on the follies of the human forces in the war as well, before taking a dig at Cardin for not paying attention in class. Jaune drops his head to the desk as his friends look at him with concern. Of course, none of his friends know what's going on, and we the audience only have an inkling of what caused the previously attentive Jaune to suddenly be lackluster in class. It only comes to light for the audience when Cardin pulls him aside after class and casually orders Jaune to do tomorrow's homework for all of Team Cardinal. During lunch, his friends express their concern, but he shrugs them off, heading back to the dorm to get an early jump on his obscene workload. Yang voices her concerns to Pyrrha, who is also uneasy and equally confused, but feels too polite to pry. Yang huffs in frustration that it hasn't even been a single semester and their friends group is already going through massive bouts of drama. Sick of it, she states her intent to bring all of it to an end personally, a notion that Pyrrha objects to, saying that getting involved would just further complicate the drama. Yang brushes off the assertion and tries to get Blake's solidarity on the issue, only for Blake to be distracted watching Cardin harass Velvet. Catching this, Yang and Pyrrha comment that people like Cardin are trash, but there's unfortunately nothing any of them can really do about it. Nora enthusiastically suggests breaking his legs, but Yang and Pyrrha retort that it would get them suspended if not expelled. Blake, however, bites back, asking why stopping a bully would be a bad thing. To everyone's surprise, Weiss walks up to the lunch table and weighs in, commenting her own bafflement that Faunus are even allowed to attend Beacon. This comment leads to a trade of barbs between her, Blake, and later Yang, raising tensions at the table. The argument comes to an abrupt end when Ruby arrives with her own lunch.
Balls, okay. So, when it comes to Weiss in Volume 1, this is going to sound horrible, I know. But she could have used a few more extra derogatory terms towards Faunus. Like I said, it's going to sound horrible, but hear me out. I feel like her character could have used more derogatory terms towards the Faunus in order to establish a better, showing us as the audience that she has this grudge against them. And of course, we find out in a later episode why she has that grudge. And, there is two perspectives there, one from Blake, one from Weiss, and we do see Weiss's point of view in the show proper. I do want to emphasize she does have her point of view, and keeping in mind that's the only point of view she knows. She does not know Blake's point of view either. So, two different points of views. One grew up this way, one grew up this way. Nonetheless, though, we could have used more stuff like that from Weiss sprinkled throughout the episode, but throughout the volume a little bit more, because it feels like when that one episode comes up where it's revealed that Blake's a Faunus and this and that, it feels like they are laying it on extra thick for that one particular episode and those particular scenes in order for Weiss and Blake to actually go to blows, not physical blows, but, back and forth verbal blows. And it just feels like they're laying it on thick, when if they would have just spread stuff throughout the volume and then let the tension build up until it explodes into the big reveal that Blake is a Faunus. And the aspect that I do like is Fixing RWBY keeps it where we don't know that Blake is a Faunus throughout Volume 1, because that's completely ruined for the reveal when it comes to the show proper. Because when we're talking about the show proper, us as the audience, we're like, oh, well, we already knew this, so it's no big deal. To us, it's just like, all right, let's move on to the next thing. But if we had it like this, and we didn't have the Blake trailer, we could have just had, I don't know how they could have did it, but we could have had just Adam have his own short showing us who the White Fang are. And then we could have just had Blake be here in the show proper. I wish we would have never known about Blake's trailer and know that she's a Faunus. Either way, though, I feel like we could have used more of that back and forth throughout the volume that we're getting with this fix right here, such as when Weiss came up to the table and then her and Blake kind of went back and forth. But let's continue. And what?
She and Weiss hold glares at each other for a few seconds before Weiss huffs and goes to find more suitable company. Ruby sits with them, though only pecks at her food, saying she heard Glinda was looking into a possible transfer. While Yang thought that news might make Ruby happy, Ruby laments that when they worked together in the forest, she'd felt a connection with Weiss, like they really could work well as partners. As much as they've been at each other's throats, Ruby got the feeling there was more to Weiss, and she was really hopeful there might be a breakthrough. Giving no one the time to respond, Ruby says she's not hungry and goes out to finish the next level in one of her games. Before she leaves, she confirms with Blake that they're going shopping the following day for the class trip to Forever Fall. The scene ends with Yang inviting Blake and the latter some of Juniper out to party since it's Friday, to take some of the edge off. All of them decline, well, Ren turns down for Nora, and Yang remarks that it's their loss. She stands from the table and meets with her friends from episode 2 to get ready for a night on the town, ending the episode. Episode 13 opens in Vale with Ruby and Blake shopping for camping supplies.
Balls. Right there where we ended the last episode is actually a good change as well, because it brings back Yang's friends from a previous episode, and in the show I don't think we ever saw those friends again. It shows that Yang actually has a personality outside of being Ruby's sister, and I feel like Yang definitely needs that, because we've seen glimpses of that from Volume 1 at the beginning of that one episode where she sees her friends and leaves, but then every other scene with her and Ruby is like, oh, I'm so proud of my sister, and it feels like her only personality trait is blonde, angry, and Ruby's sister. Thankfully, though, they are tweaking it right here in Fixing RWBY, and actually being like, hey, you know, I do got friends other than y'all, so if y'all ain't gonna be with me, y'all's lost. See ya. Let's continue with Blake and Ruby here. And I do like this aspect of having them interact a little bit more. Blake and Ruby definitely should have been interacting a lot more than they did. So let's continue. And play. Ah, jeez, I can't believe I did it. Play. Third time's the charm, right? Let's continue and play.
The survival class is headed to a location called Forever Fall as a practice expedition, and their team's collective grade in the class ends up dictating their budget for supplies. The purpose of the system was to emphasize the value of education and instill a sense of resourcefulness when that fails them in the field. Unfortunately, it also leaves the struggling Team Ruby quite strapped for cash. For all the stress being put on them, the two are in oddly high spirits, able to bond over a number of different book series while they shop. Blake is even surprised by some of Ruby's choices in literature, as they convey more complex themes than the normally bubbly girl initially seemed able to handle, calling back to Blake's dismissive "life isn't like a fairy tale" line. Ruby goes a bit deeper into her own musings on the subject. She loves old stories, but when she would go to look them up herself, she often found the originals and not the modern versions taught to kids. It opened her eyes to see how scary the world can be. However, she looked at how each story was pacified for younger audiences and found an underlying truth in how something fun and enjoyable can be born from something more twisted. She looks at the world as something that is plagued by monsters, and people like Huntsman are the force that will slowly change that reality into a more fun and friendly one. Admittedly, she doesn't express herself very well. I mean, who's she going to talk about this with? Yang? Tai? But Blake learns to respect the surprising amount of maturity Ruby has. She challenges Ruby, asking if Weiss being so difficult to work with is analogous to her musings. Ruby admits that she never thought the process would be easy, and Weiss is just the first real indication of the kind of world she's going to have to learn to work with. Meanwhile, a hungover Yang is slapped awake by Coco in the coffee dorm room, who chides her for getting drunk when the rest of her team is already in disarray. As she explains, her and Velvet found the blonde asleep on the door to Team Ruby's dorm, after the two had come back.
Okay, so pause real fast, because I don't know why I didn't pause right after he said Yang, so I can actually talk about that for a second. But yeah, Blake and Ruby's discussion. Great discussion. I like it. It definitely, if I get the word definitely out of my mouth, it definitely puts a perspective on fairy tales. Life isn't a fairy tale, but if you go back to the fairy tales, you'll actually see and look at them and realize that they're pacified and kiddified for, you know, a generation of children. And if you look at the originals and what things originate from, it originates from some pretty evil stuff in all reality. It originates from very dark beginnings, such as Cinderella, by the way, where the stepsisters will literally cut parts of their feet off to fit into the slipper, and where then Cinderella then has the birds come across and just peck their eyes out, and it's some dark stuff in there. I mean, the original stories are not meant for children. I mean, back in the day, they might have taught children stuff about that, but not nowadays. So yeah. Other than that, though, I like that interaction. That seems like a good. I need to re-listen to that because it feels like that's a really good thing for Ruby to be saying. Like he said in there about Blake, really surprising about the maturity level that Ruby does have. But as we move forward, we have Yang drunk from the partying. So I guess I guess legal drinking age in Vale is like 18. I don't know how old Yang is. Either way, let's continue.
Back in from their morning jog, and they dragged her back to their own room. Yang retorts that she lost her keys, and Velvet chides her that there's a couch in the commons. Yang feebly tries to shove Coco and the rest of Team Coffee away. She groans that she just needed a break from it all. There's really nothing she can do. Getting involved would just spur on more drama, so she tried to drown her woes in booze and hoped it would all go away. Yatsuhashi's about to say something when Coco slaps her again, berating her that, sure, jumping in at the wrong moment will make things messier, but jumping in at the precise right moment can go miles towards solving the issue. Irritated bickering ensues between the two, before Yang decides to concede defeat and think over the issue. She makes her way to the door, and says she's going to see if she can convince Weiss to open the dorm for her. Back shopping, Blake and Ruby split up, only for Ruby to run into Penny, who happily joins in on the equipment hunt. Along the way they find Pyrrha, doing much the same, but who is also worriedly looking for Jaune, who she lost while shopping downtown. We flip over to Blake, who ironically runs into Jaune. At Cardin's demand, he'd snuck away from Pyrrha in order to purchase a mysterious unmarked box. Looking at Blake and recalling her stealthy nature, paired possibly with some good comedic clips of her being sneaky around the dorms, Jaune strikes upon a plan and pulls her aside, asking her help with something sensitive. Blake is resistant until he mentions getting back at Cardin and getting him off his back. With a grudge against the bully, Blake ends the episode asking what Jaune needs her to do. Episode 14 is the exciting conclusion to the Jaune Arc, with all the teams camping in Forever Fall as a part of Professor Peach's survival course. Glinda, one of the other chaperones, explains the day's assignment of gathering sap and leaves the teams to do their work. She pulls Weiss and Ruby aside and explains that while they are making the unusual preparations to swap teams, the two are still partners for the interim and should work together as amicably as possible, for which Ruby takes the suggestion seriously. When Weiss makes a dry, insulting quip, Ruby manages to stomach it peacefully. In fact, Ruby asks Weiss to take the lead in an attempt to placate the heiress and avoid further friction. Weiss haughtily accepts the suggestion and begins doling out instructions while Blake and Yang watch. We cut to Team Cardinal, who are loafing around while Jaune does all the work collecting their allotment of sap. However, Jaune only comes back with enough jars for him and his own team. He has collected nothing for Team Cardinal. Cardin is, of course, livid, but Jaune stands up to him with a shaky confidence. His confidence gives way as Cardin ignores his posturing and instructs his teammates to collect the sap jars. Grabbing Jaune by the hoodie, Cardin drags him off to fulfill his master plan, to coat Pyrrha in sap and unleash the contents of the mystery box that Jaune bought for Cardin. Cardin reveals the box contains rapier wasps, who are among many
Balls. Okay, so I was going to pause earlier when I found out that Jaune went to Blake about getting back at Cardin, but I was like, let me see where this plays out. But I see where we're going with this now, because Jaune, okay, it's a little flipped on its head, because Cardin had originally Jaune get the box of rapiers, but Jaune ended up getting the rapiers as a surprise box for Cardin. So, yeah, okay, so Blake's going to be helping. Okay, so they're turning this part on its head a little bit, and we're getting a little bit of a different scenario when it comes to how Jaune gets away from pretty much being under Cardin's thumb, because Cardin now knows that Jaune, you know, forged his way into Beacon. Yeah, interesting. Definitely interesting. Let's see where we go with this and see if it's a better change, if it's a just kind of like a blah change, or let's just see where we go with it. And blah.
Different animals attracted to the sap from the trees of Forever Fall, a fact Cardin learned from reading the reports Jaune did on his behalf. Realizing this is a plan to hurt his friend, Jaune works up the nerve and finally turns on Cardin. When Cardin extorts him to throw the first jar at Pyrrha, Jaune instead throws it at Cardin's armor, coating him in—
Pause. Okay, hold on. I think I misheard something, and Cardin did get Jaune to get the box of rapiers. Okay, so I must have misheard something, but he did talk to Blake about doing something. So there is still something there. So, okay, just putting it out there as a correction to myself that I missed something along that lines. Either way, let's continue this and play. Okay, so in case you don't know yet, by the way, I got a new tablet other than the tablet that I was having, because I crushed the other tablet when I tripped in this truck and literally broke it in half when I fell up front. So I got a new tablet, and now the play button is on the left hand side as opposed to being in the middle, and it's got me all messed up. So let's try this all over again and hit this play button, which is on the left, and play. Wow, I did it again. So let me hit the X for the info and play.
Sap instead. Enraged, Cardin and his team immediately rush to beat the crap out of Jaune, only to be interrupted partway through when an Ursa, a bear-shaped Grim, attracted by the sap, attacks. Why is the Ursa attracted to the sap? I honestly don't know. This was a flaw in the original RWBY that flew under my radar when I first wrote this, and I failed to address it. Maybe Grim have some semblance of the animals they represent? Maybe the sap smells like blood? Who knows? It's just a thing that Ursas are apparently attracted to, and we just gotta roll with it. All of Team Cardinal, save Cardin, scatter, leaving him and Jaune alone to deal with the Ursa. Cardin tries to fend off the beast, only to lose his mace over the side of a cliff, leaving him unarmed for the rest of the fight. We cut over to Team RWBY, where Yang and Blake are busy gathering sap. Behind them, in the background, are Ruby and Weiss. Strangely for their dynamic, they seem to be getting along, a moment where Weiss has let her guard down and the sparks of their chemistry manage to break through the tension between them. This peaceful scene is interrupted as Russell bursts through the underbrush and falls to his knees in front of Blake. He begs Blake and her team to save Cardin, citing back to how she saved him during initiation. Blake is visibly tempted to refuse, but decides to help after she hears Jaune screaming as well. She calls to Ruby, Weiss, Yang, and Pyrrha, who drop everything and rush to help. Nora, by this point, has passed out from eating too much sap, leaving Ren to make sure she stays safe. Arriving at the cliffside clearing, Ruby quickly assesses the situation and puts Blake, Yang, and Pyrrha on guard along its perimeter. Weiss objects, saying they can overrun the Ursa by rushing it together, but Ruby slips into full leader mode and snaps at Weiss just to do as she says. As this exchange happens, Cardin tries to brain the Ursa with one of the jars of sap. All he really succeeds in doing is covering it in goo. This, however, gives Jaune an idea. He grabs his own jar, opens it, and uses the scent to lure the Ursa away from Cardin. Ruby very harshly explains to Weiss that she's going to knock the bear off the cliff. To do so, she needs a boost from one of Weiss's glyphs to give her kick the extra oomph. But first, she needs an opening. Both Jaune and Pyrrha hear this, and Jaune immediately sprints for the cliff, acting as bait. Luckily for the plan, the Ursa goes for him and gives them the opening they need. Using Weiss's glyphs, Ruby launches forward and slams into the Ursa's side, sending it hurtling over.
Pause. I don't know how I feel about it so far. I like that there's teamwork there. I like the aspect of Ruby really taking the lead and really pushing forward and just saying to Weiss, look, do it. You know, I'm the leader. Do it. I like this aspect of her actually being a leader and pushing what she says and getting her team to do what she says. But I do think that we need something for Jaune to feel confident about. And with what they did with Jaune and how Pyrrha controlled, Pyrrha pretty much showed everyone that she has the, semblance of polarity. When she did that with Jaune's shield and possibly sword, I'm undecided on how I feel about that scene now. But when she helped him with that Ursa, I feel like that built his confidence up, and that is something that Jaune needed. That was a good scene that I really feel didn't need fixing, but maybe they got something in the back of their mind that of how they wanted, help him with his confidence later. I just don't like it. I don't know. I'm conflicted on it because I like it, but I don't. I like this change, but I don't at the same time. I like it for the respect of Ruby actually leading her team and getting them to do what she wants, but I don't because it takes away from the confidence that Jaune could have had built on top of him. But at the same time, when you look back at the episode, it builds a sense of false confidence. So, I don't know. I'm up in the air. Let's continue this. And
over the edge. Jaune would have been caught up in the attack, unable to dodge out of the way, if not for Pyrrha subtly using her until now unknown semblance to pull him the extra few inches out of harm's way. Yang notices Pyrrha's subtle motions and asks her what she just did. Smiling sheepishly, Pyrrha whispers that her semblance is polarity, and at Yang's confused gaze, further elaborates that she can manipulate metal. Oh, that's really attractive. Pyrrha's smile becomes unimpressed, but she puts a finger to her lips and asks Yang to keep her semblance on the down low. Yang affirms, "My lips are sealed. Magnetically." Pyrrha gives a disappointed stare before we cut away. With the rest of the team, Weiss chews Ruby out for her ludicrous plan, saying the combined teams could have just charged in there to overwhelm it. However, Ruby stands up for herself and defends her actions. It was an Ursa Major that attacked, which are primarily solo hunters. But if she were wrong and it was just a normal Ursa, then they would have had to deal with an entire pack, in which case their strongest fighters were already defending the perimeter to hold the line. In addition, since she assumed that it was a Major, she knew that none of their weapons would be able to pierce its hide, meaning the only way to deal with it would be to knock it off the cliff instead. In fact, there's a chance the Ursa isn't even dead at the bottom of the cliff. Weiss is dumbfounded by Ruby's cunning, but more infuriated at being talked down to, so she stomps off in a fit. Moving over to Jaune, he helps Cardin stand. Cardin doesn't bother to even thank Jaune for the help, but Jaune squeezes Cardin's hand painfully tight before declaring, "We're done." Cardin is confused, but Jaune finally pops the trump card he's been carrying the whole trip. He had a friend, heavily implied to be Blake, sneak in and swap out Cardin's transcripts with forged replicas that Jaune made from the originals. Effectively, this means Jaune and Cardin have the same blackmail hanging over each other's heads. If Cardin tries to expose Jaune for forgery, Jaune can just as easily point to Cardin's transcripts as forged, and get them both expelled. Cardin is shocked and angered at Jaune's gall, and is left speechless as Jaune says, in no uncertain terms, that Cardin is not to mess with him or his friends ever again. Cardin angrily rips his hand away and grunts in acknowledgement before...
Okay, so for the most part, a lot of things were kept the same. At least they kept Jaune standing up for himself against Cardin. So there is that aspect as well. And I do like the fact that Blake went in, changed the transcripts, and kind of forged something else for Cardin. And I guess it adds a different dynamic between Cardin and Jaune. Even though in all reality, I think that Ozpin would already know. Like, look, dude, we've seen these transcripts. We've got them backed up on our scrolls. These are the originals. These are fake. So somebody came in and changed these. Yours, on the other hand, have always been forged. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, honestly. I feel like the original was a little better because it shows that Cardin could then look at what Jaune just did, even though it was with help from Pyrrha. But Cardin could look up and be like, holy crap, maybe I don't need to mess with this guy anymore. He has a little bit more to him than I thought he did. So I feel like that, even though it's false confidence, it still brings that confidence to Jaune. And Jaune needs the confidence. But either way, it's a change. We'll see how it pans out. If it pans out for the best, pans out for the best. If it doesn't, hey, who cares? It's just volume 1. We've got 8 more volumes after this to go through. So, either way, let's continue, because I'm going to let, unless something major happens and I just got to pause and talk, I'm just going to let it play through. I think we're even going to have some credits here at the end. So, yeah, it's only like a minute and a half left. So I'm just going to let it play through. And then, of course, same things as always. Afterthoughts, all that good stuff. Let's do this. Play.
Stomping off. We fade in on our last scene, with Jaune on one of the dorm's rooftops. Pyrrha walks up behind him, commenting that she was looking for him. Jaune turns to her and apologizes for cutting her off when she tried to help. The two make amends, and Pyrrha invites Jaune downstairs since Ren apparently made pancakes. Jaune stops her as she goes, and after rambling about how he doesn't deserve it, asks if she's still willing to train him. In response, Pyrrha pretends to mull the idea over, walking up to Jaune and shoving him to the ground, commenting how his form is all wrong. Pulling him to his feet, she smiles and says, "Let me show you how it's done." Cut to black. End of episode.
Okay, so there we go. It's like I said, there's going to be some credits playing here, and obviously this is not one of those kind of series that has after credit scenes or anything like that, or at least I hope not. But there we go. Oh, look, I didn't even know they even had, I happened to see part of the credits, Ice Queendom in there, and all that good stuff. So we've got music from so many different things. Either way, I need to focus on my afterthoughts here. Okay, so for the most part, yes, we are keeping Pyrrha and Jaune's relationship the same, where Jaune's this freaking idiot who doesn't understand that Pyrrha is just kind of, she doesn't know how to hit on, you know, people, so she's kind of just trying to get him alone, and you know, she doesn't understand, you know, she's trying to get some alone time with him, and he's such a doofus that he doesn't understand these things. And I like their relationship because I feel like she's one who just wants to be seen for who she is, and she feels like she can get that from Jaune. And Jaune is a doofus that does, who's, irregardless of what he tries to act like, is a doofus when he's around, you know, girls and stuff like that, and doesn't know how to react when they're obviously crushing on him. And Pyrrha's obviously crushing on him, so I don't know, they got an awkward relationship that's cute and adorable in my eyes. That's just me though, I don't know. Other than that, wasn't a big fan of the changes made to the Cardin and Jaune story and the aspect of the Grimm and how they defeated the Grimm. But, you know, y'all have heard my thoughts on that as we were going through it, because, yeah, I'm not going to elaborate too much on it, but I'm a big fan of how they did the original version. I mean, looking back at it, it built his confidence up with him defeating the Grimm, literally cutting the head off the Grimm. And then Cardin could look up from the ground, you know, he's on the ground, he's looking up at Jaune, seeing what he just did to this Grimm, and he's able to look at him and be like, holy crap, I don't need to be messing with this guy no more. I'm going to quit, blah, 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 blah. I feel like that's a pretty good, you know, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I met my match. Maybe he's just, you know, maybe he's just being a good guy and he's not attacking me back. Maybe he's just a pacifist. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the whole giving Jaune some confidence type thing. As far as the Blake and changing transcripts and stuff like that, not a big fan of that either. It's kind of like blah. It's not the best change, but not the worst change. It's just a change. I mean, I can get over it. If I wanted to do the change, I always tell people I'm not criticizing. Well, I don't always tell people. I'll always say in videos when it comes to criticizing stuff, I'm not criticizing what they're doing because they're obviously doing it. They're making the effort. They're the ones who are, they're the ones doing it, and they have the time for it. They have the passion. I don't have the passion. I don't have the time for it. I don't have all that to, quote, write an entire series, because that's essentially what they're doing. That's not my thing. I don't know how to do that. So essentially, they're building the groundwork of something bigger, and I don't see it yet, but there's probably something more to all the changes they've made here. So just like when it comes to drawing and painting and other forms of art, writing is an art as well. I'm not criticizing or saying that they should have done it a different way or anything like that, because that's their way. Just because I didn't necessarily like it doesn't mean I don't respect it. Hopefully what I said just then makes sense, because it makes sense up here in my head. I just don't know if it makes sense once it's coming out of the mouth. Yeah. Let me add to that really, really fast. It doesn't make sense coming out of my mouth. In my head, it doesn't make sense coming out of my mouth. If I can get words to come out of my mouth, wow. I think I need to shut this. I need to shut down for the night. But yeah, in a sense, what I'm saying is they're the ones doing it. They've got the passion, and I have no right to criticize them. Wow. I've lost every every word I'm trying to say. So pretty much in a nutshell, if I can even remember what I was saying, wow, I feel a little weird now, even recording this and leaving this in. But yes, my brain just spaced out and just went 15 different directions, and I need to shut down and just call the wife and go to bed for the night. But yeah, in a sense of essentially what I'm saying, if I could wrap it up in a 10-second little aspect, they're doing their thing, and I can only criticize it if I was really doing it, as well. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry for just kind of trailing off there and just kind of, I don't even have the words for it. I'm just sorry for the way I ended this video, because I don't know. Wow. Everything I just said was just kind of just trailed off and became nothingness. So I'm sorry for that. Wow, I don't know where my mind went. So yeah, in a sense, I need to shut up, pass it off to y'all. I feel like some of y'all know what I'm saying, and I feel like some of y'all also know where I'm coming from when it comes to your brain just kind of melting all of a sudden, and you just don't have the words that you want to say. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know, but something happened, and I just don't know. Something happened with my brain, and it just went blah. So either way, though, changes made. Some I like, some I don't. But at the end of it, who cares? It'll all wash itself out in the end. So just like the show proper, there's some things I like, some things I don't like. You can't satisfy everybody. So either way, I'm shutting up because my brain is bleh. So hit that like, tickle to subscribe if you're new. Don't be texting and driving. Watch what you love and love what you watch. And take it away, Mr. Rogers.
I like you just the way you are.